Authentication with NextAuth in a Next.js project is easy, right? Well, it's not always easy, but after this video you'll master the fundamentals of creating authentication in a Next.js project. In this video you'll learn two types of authentication. First of all, OAuth using GitHub, and also email auth using magic links. So the user will sign in with his email, then he will get a magic link, and with the magic link he'll then sign in into our application. Also, we'll style our application using Tailwind CSS and Shadcn UI to make it look a bit nicer, and then at the end we'll of course deploy to Vercel, check out how the deployment version works, and then we are finally done. So now let's check out the demo behind me and let's go! So on my screen you now see what we'll build today. So currently I'm on the index page and I'm currently not logged in. That's why it tells me please log in to see something special. I can now click on login, which will redirect me to the auth page. Right here I can now sign in. There are two options, either with GitHub or with email. Let's first of all check out GitHub. I'll click on the button. You will now see I will get redirected back to the index page, and now it tells me you're logged in. I can now log out, so let me click on log out and I will get redirected to the auth page. I can now log in with email, so I will type my email right now. Then I can click on the button and now you'll see on the bottom right corner a toast which tells me check your email. So now let me open my email real quick. So now you see I got a magic link, and once I click on sign in I will get redirected again to the index page, and as you see I now have a session. I can also now try to reach the auth route, so let me do that /auth. You will see I will get redirected back to the index page, since when I have a session I don't want to authenticate again. So that's what we'll build today. So now strap in and let's go. So to get started, I will cd into my desktop directory, cd into my YouTube directory, and I will run npx create -next-app at latest to install the latest package of Next.js. The CLI will now ask me a few things, so we'll name our application, let's see, Next-Auth YouTube. Then we'll use TypeScript, we'll use ESLint, we will use Tailwind, we won't use the source directory since we'll use the app router, and we won't customize the default import alias, and now the CLI will take a bit and install all of the packages needed for a new Next.js project. So the CLI has now finally installed Next.js 14, so I can now go to Visual Studio Code and open a project. As you see I already opened it, and if you want to do the same you can click on top, click on File and click on new open folder. But now we have a default template, so what you see on the right is just the default template which comes when I run the command to install Next.js. So the first thing I want to do is clean up a bit. So if we go inside of the app folder, inside of the globals.css file, we have a bit of default styles. Let me just delete that since I won't need that. Then the next thing I want to do is now actually install Shadcn UI, so let's go to the website. So now I'm at Shadcn UI, and Shadcn UI is just a basic component library which is styled and accessible, which builds on Radix UI, and we'll just use it to get some default styles. Since I don't want to write many CSS styles, we want just to make a basic demo of authentication, and that's why we'll use Shadcn UI for that. So let's click on documentation, installation, Next.js as a framework, and then let me run the CLI. So I will copy the command for npm. Let's head back, let's open the terminal. For that you can use either command J or go on top and click on terminal and new terminal. Inside of here let me now paste the command to initialize Shadcn UI. This will now ask me a few things, so let's use TypeScript, let's use the default styles. As in base color we'll use slate. Then our global CSS file is correct. Then we'll use CSS variables. Our tailwind.config.js is not located in this file, since if you open your Explorer right now, we have in tailwind.config.ts. So let us rename it right now. So instead of tailwind.config.js, we'll have in tailwind.config.ts. Let me click enter. This looks also correct. Add components, add libutils is also correct. We use server components, and yes, let's write a configuration file. So now you see it initializes or it installs all dependencies, and now Shadcn UI is actually set up. You see now our CSS variables, and if I go to the tailwind.config.ts, we also extend our theme right here. So that looks nice. Let's now install a bit of components which we'll need. So let me search right here for a button, since I want to use a button of course to sign in. So let me just copy the CLI command. Let's open my terminal and let's paste that. Then let me install a few more components. Let's also get a input. So let's install that. Let me copy the command with npm. Let's open the terminal. Let's paste that. Then let's search for a label. Let me click on that. Let's copy the CLI command with npm. Let's paste it on our terminal and install that. Then I also want to get a card component, so let me find that. Let's copy the installation command with npm and let me paste that also inside of here. The last thing I want is to get a toast, so let's search for toast. This will just be used later on to show a success message. So let me also copy the command right here. Let's go back and let's install that. I think this should be all for now, but if there will be anything else, we'll install it at a later stage. So now I think it's time to test out if everything works. So let me close everything. Let's again open my terminal. Let's clear everything and let's run npm run dev to start our dev server. This will now open on localhost 3000 as you see. So let's head over and open that. So I'm now on localhost 3000. Let me zoom in a bit for you guys. And as you see, that's the default template by Next.js. We don't want that. So let's actually delete that and create our own UI. So let me open my Explorer again. Let's go in the app folder inside of the page.tsx, and here you see the default template. Let me just delete everything inside of the return statement. We don't need it. And let's just say for now h1 or an h1 tag, and let's say hello from the index page. Let's save that, let's go back, and yeah, you see that. So that works. So now, since the fundamentals are set for Next.js, so we have installed Next.js, we have created or we have installed a component library, and we have deleted the default styles, and we see everything works. So now I think we can start with the fun stuff, which is authentication with NextAuth. So let's head over to Next.auth.js. So I'm now on the Next.auth.js website, and as you probably know, Next.auth.js is a open source authentication provider. You can use it to make authentication work. You have multiple providers, for example, Google, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want actually. And you have multiple adapters. So for example, Prisma, Supabase, I don't know, Drizzle or whatever you want to use. For this project, we'll use Prisma as our query layer. So with Prisma, we'll query our database at Supabase and store our session and user data. And then we'll use as a provider GitHub and email, so magic links through email. So yeah, let's get started. So now let me click right here on documentation to get started, and right here you now have an introduction. So if you want to, I would highly suggest you guys to read through it. You will learn a bit about Next.auth.js and how it's actually built, what the fundamentals are, etc, etc. I won't cover that because I think we can actually get started and you will learn enough when we do it. So let me click right here on getting started, and then we have right here a new project or an existing project. So now we have already created a project, so we have an existing project. So the first step is to install NextAuth. So let me copy the install command, which is npm install NextAuth. Let's head back. Let me stop my dev server, clear everything, and let me paste the installation command. This will now install NextAuth for us, and now let's go back. So now the next step, as you see right here, is to add an API route. But if you look at the code example right here, this is for the pages folder or for the pages router, so for the old Next.js router. But since we use Next.js 14 and since we have chosen to use the app router, so nested routing in that sense, we can't use the pages router, or we can do it, but it's not very recommended. So right here you have in text right here, it says if you're using Next.js 13.2 or above with the new app router, so we do that, we use Next.js 14 with the app router, you can initialize the configuration using the new route handlers by following our guide. So let me click on this right here, and now you will see we will get redirected to a new route, and now you see how you can initialize an API route, and that's exactly what we'll do. So to get started, what we'll do is again open our Explorer. Let me close my terminal. And then in the app folder, we want to create a new API folder. Then inside of the API folder, we want to create an auth folder. If you then go back, you see the next folder is in brackets right here, .NextAuth. So let me just copy that and then paste it inside of here just to be sure that I have not misspelled anything. And then inside of here, inside of this Next-Auth folder, I want to create a new file called route.ts. Now the important thing is you have to name it route.ts. You can't name it anything else, since right here we create an API route, and Next.js only sees it as an API route if it's named route.ts. So be sure that you name it route.ts and not something different. But now we have created our own API route for NextAuth, and now we have to create a bit of configuration. So let's head over to the documentation again. So now if you look right here, they tell us internally NextAuth detects that it's being initialized in a route handler by understanding that it's passed a web request instance and will return a handler that returns a response instance. A route handler file expects you to export named handler functions that handle a request and return response. NextAuth needs a get and post handler to function properly. So that's what you do right here. You initialize NextAuth, you pass your options, so what providers you use, what adapters you use, and then at the last step you export your handler as a get request and as a post request, since that's what NextAuth needs to work properly. So we will actually initialize our NextAuth a bit different, since we will later on want to get our session through the server and not through the client. So to make that work, we'll actually have to initialize our NextAuth a bit differently. But again, let's go back and I will show it to you. So we start actually the same as right here in this example. We'll first have to import NextAuth, and NextAuth is imported from NextAuth. And then under that, what we have to do now is create a constant handler, or you can actually name it whatever you want, but I will name it handler. Then this will be equal to NextAuth. So now we have to pass an argument to NextAuth. So an argument, what I mean with that, we have to pass the options. So what providers do we want to use, what adapter do we want to use. Now there are two ways you could do that. You could either do it right here as they showed in the example, but then the problem would be that you can't use the server get server session hook to get the session through the server, and we of course want to get our session through the server. So how would you achieve this? Well, what I would do is actually create a separate file, then create all of the configuration in the separate file, and then just pass this file or the function that sense as an argument to this NextAuth function. So let's actually do that. So how do I do that? I go inside of the app folder. Let's create a new folder called utils. And now inside of this utils, let me create a new file called auth.ts. Now, as I already said, inside of this file, I now want to create the configuration, so the providers and the adapter. So how do I do that? Let's first of all export a constant. Let's name it auth options, and this will be equal now to a empty object for now. But now there's one thing. If I click, for example, on Control spacebar, I don't get any specific types to auth options. That's not exactly what I want, since I use TypeScript. I want to get types. Now, how do I achieve it that I get types? Well, there's a very handy keyword actually from TypeScript, which is satisfies. So what I want to do is that this object satisfies the NextAuth options. So right here we can do a satisfies, and this should satisfy the NextAuth options. This is imported from NextAuth, and actually let's import that as in type. Now right here we get an error, but that's not a problem, since if I now go inside of this object and click Control spacebar, you see we now get actually types which are based on the auth options. So now what's the first thing we want to do? Well, we want to get the providers. Now providers is an array with individual objects of the provider I want to use. So for example, the GitHub provider, Google provider, email provider, credentials provider, whatever you want. Each provider is an object inside of this provider's array. So what we can do now is go back to the docs, and if you go right here on providers, so above the adapters, you can see the individual adapters that NextAuth offers. And you see there are multiple ones. So Google, Dropbox, Discord, credentials, I don't know, GitHub, whatever you want. There are very many, and it's very easy to set them up. So in this project, we'll use GitHub since it's very simple. Let's click on GitHub actually. And then right here you see how to get started. Right here you already have an example. So as I already said, we have the providers array. If we go back, you see we have created that array. And then inside of this providers array, we then have to initialize our providers. So the GitHub provider in that sense. So let's actually do that. So what I will do is on top, again, copy this import statement. Let's go back, let me paste that inside of here. And now we can use this GitHub provider inside of our array. So let's get right here our GitHub provider. And now we have to pass again 2 arguments to this GitHub provider. So we first of all have to get the client ID, which is in string, and we have to get a client secret, which is also a string. Now, of course, you don't want to pass them as strings, you want to pass them as secrets. And how do you do that? Well, use an .env, so an environment variable. So what I will do right now is open my Explorer. Then let's create a new file, which is called .env. Again, right here I store the environment variables. And before I do anything with that, let's be safe. Let's go to the git ignore, and right here, let me just add .env. I do that to not push my environment variables to my GitHub repository, because that's not safe. And now inside of this env file, I can store my environment variables. So let's first of all get the GitHub, let's do it uppercase, GitHub _ID, and this will be equal, for now, just some gibberish. I will change it later. And then we'll also have an GitHub _secret _ let's say ID, and let's also do some gibberish for now. So what I can do now is actually get the data right here through my environment variables. So let's do a process.env. How did I name it? Let's check GitHub ID. So I will copy that and then paste that. Also, you see right now we get an error. So if I hover over client ID, it tells me type string or undefined is not assignable to type string. So what does the error actually say in basic terms? Well, it does not really know if GitHub ID is defined or not. So for now, it could be undefined or it could be defined. But we know that it's defined, so we can just say as string and we don't get any errors anymore. Now let's do the same for client secret. So process.env. Let's check how it's called right here, GitHub _secret ID. Let's paste it and let's do an as string. So now in theory, we have already set up our GitHub provider and it's already almost works. Of course, the environment variables are not correct for now, but in theory now our auth provider works. So what I can do now is go back to my route.ts where I have my handler, and now I can actually pass my auth options as an argument. So I can now import the auth options, and as you see, I don't get any errors anymore. Now, if you can also remember, I have to export my handler as a get and post request to make NextAuth work. So let us do that right now. So under this handler, let's do a export, and I want to export a object, and let's say handler as a get, and let's do also handler as a post request. So now our API route, so the API route for NextAuth fully works, and we don't get any errors anymore. Also, one important thing right here, you see NextAuth is imported from next-auth/next and not from next-auth. So let me delete this old import statement, and that looks very nice. So now our API route is done and we can actually continue with our auth options. So what's the next step which I want to use? I think the next step we want to do is the email provider, so the magic links. Let's go back to our docs and let's search for email. Where is it? Email. Right here, we have email. So what exactly is the email provider? Well, the email provider uses magic links to send a person a link, so a magic link, with which the user can then sign in. And you probably also already saw them a bunch of times, for example, Notion or Slack. It's very easy to use and it's actually way more safe than credentials. So I see many people always use credentials right here. And I would not suggest you guys to use credentials. Why? It's not safe. People often forget their passwords or use the same passwords, which makes the user much more vulnerable against attacks or hacker attacks. And that's why I would always use the email provider. So now let's scroll down and let's see how to make it work. So right here we have configuration. NextAuth lets you send emails either via HTTP or SMTP. Now I would always highly suggest you guys to use SMTP. Now why would I do that? Well, that's because it's very easy to change your providers. Since with SMTP all you need is the host, the email server, etc. And with HTTP it always works a bit different with every provider. That's why I will use SMTP. And right here you see already one thing you have to do is install NodeMailer, and we will need NodeMailer to make SMTP sending work. So right here what we have to do is npm install NodeMailer. So let me copy that, let's open the terminal and let's paste that. Since now Node Mailer is installed, we can go back and let's scroll down a bit. So there are now two steps that we can use, or there are two steps to make SMTP work. The first one is to use the connection string. I won't do that. What I will actually use is a configuration object. So let me just copy all of this environment secrets. We'll need them. Let's go to our environment variable file and let me paste them right here. Also, I can right here add a description and let's just say, I don't know, envs for email service. So now we have created this environment variables. Of course, we'll change the data for that later once we actually go to our email service and sign in and do that. But for now, let's just skip that. Let's scroll down and you see now you can add the provider settings to Next-Auth.js options object in the email provider. That's exactly what we'll do. So let me copy right here this import command. Let's go to auth.ts, so our auth configuration file. Let me paste that. And now under the GitHub provider, I can use the email provider. Now inside of here, I again have to add a few things. So if I go back to the docs right here, we again have to add our host, our port, our user, our password, and from which email we sent. So I will just copy that actually since it's much simpler. So let's copy that and paste it inside of here. And now we have created our configuration for email. So magic links now also work. So now we have created our providers, which is nice, right? Yeah, it's cool. But now there's one problem. If you think about it, you create a user, or in that sense, you right here authenticate as a user. Now you have to store the data somewhere. How do you do that? Well, you use an adapter. So if we go right here, let me close the providers tab and let me click on adapters. Now again, what are adapters? Well, these are used to store the data somewhere in a database. And since we'll use Prisma to query our database, we'll also right here use Prisma as an adapter. So right here you can click on Prisma. And then what you will see is we'll get redirected to this Auth.js website. I know it's a bit confusing, but NextAuth and Auth.js are almost like the same project, I guess. NextAuth was the original project, then Auth.js became a global project for multiple frameworks. And now we have two docs, which are, I know, not perfect, but I guess it is what it is. But now we have the Prisma adapter right here, which we want to use. And right here we already have an installation command, which is to install Prisma and also install the adapter. So let me just copy that. Let's open my terminal and let's just paste it inside of here. So Prisma and the adapter have now been finally installed. So if I now go back, you see now the next step is to add our adapter to our auth options. So let's do that. If I now go back again to our auth file, above the providers array, I can again click on Control Spacebar and you see I get the property adapter and I will also use that. So now we actually also have to get our Prisma adapter. So let's go back. Let me import the Prisma adapter right here. So copy that, paste that, and now right here I can use my Prisma adapter. So now let me also add a comma right here, and now you see we get an error. So what's the error? Well, we have to pass an argument. And what do we have to pass? Well, we have to pass the Prisma client. But how do we do that? If we go back to the docs, they show us just to create a new Prisma client. But this is not the correct way, since that will work in a production environment, but this won't work in a development environment. Since we use HMR, so hot module reloading, the application reloads when we save our application. And every time we save our application and it rebuilds, it will create a new connection to our database. We don't want to do that. So to fix that, you can go to Google right now and search Next.js Prisma best practices. And then the first link right here will show you how to fix that. So right here it tells you the problem again. So if you're in a dev environment, it creates way too many instances and then you get errors. So how do you fix that? Well, you create a new file where you initialize Prisma and you check if you're in a development environment, you make a global Prisma file. And if you're in a production environment, you just create a new, the normal new Prisma client. So let me just copy that right here. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's go inside of our app folder, utils folder, and let's create a db.ts file. I can now paste that inside of here. And again, to summarize, what we do right here is just we check if we are in a development environment. If we are in a development environment, we create a global file. And if we are in a normal production environment, we just create the normal new Prisma client. So that looks good. So we can now go back and now just import our Prisma file. And now it's now important that you don't import that from @Prisma client, but on top what we'll do is an import Prisma from, and this should be ./db. And now we can pass it right here and we don't get any errors anymore. So that looks very nice. We can now go back actually again to the docs and scroll down a bit. And it tells us right here to create this Prisma schema from scratch, or actually it gives us the models. So first of all, to paste them, we have to create a schema. So let me open my terminal and let's do a npx prisma init to initialize a new Prisma project. So what we have to do now is actually, if I open my Explorer, you will see that two things have been created. So first of all, in the environment variable file, we have now created a database URL, which is right now just a default value, which won't work. And we have also created a Prisma folder with a schema file. Now inside of the schema file, what we have to do is copy all of these models, so model account up to this model verification token. Let me do that right now. I will copy that and then I will just paste it inside of here. So now we have actually set up Prisma to work with NextAuth, and what it will do is actually when the user authenticates with NextAuth, all of the data will be stored inside of these models. So the user data, the ID, name, email, then also the session. So if the user is currently active, so if the user currently has a session, and then for example also account data with an access token, refresh token, etc. So all of this will be stored in our database, and for that of course we have to also create an actual database. Since again, if I go to the environment variable file, you see we have a default database URL which doesn't work. So what we'll do is actually go to Supabase and create a Postgres database. So now I'm at supabase.com, and if you didn't know, Supabase is actually an open source alternative to Firebase, and they also offer a Postgres database. And since that's free, up to a certain limit, we'll actually use that. So let me right here click on dashboard, and if you don't have an account, create one. Then let me click on new project, let me choose my organization, let me zoom out a bit so I see something. Then for the project name, let's do a Next-Auth, I don't know, production. Then for the password, I will generate a password and I will copy that. Then let me go back and just paste it inside of here since I'll need it in a second. Then for the region, I will choose Frankfurt since Frankfurt is the nearest to me. And then I can click on create new project. Now this will take about 2 minutes. So once that's done, I will come back. So Supabase has now finally initialized. So what I can do now is click right here on settings. Then let me click on database. And if I scroll down right here, we have a connection string. Now it's important, we don't want to use the PSQL connection string, but the URI. So let me copy that, let's go back, and let me delete this default database URL for our new database URL. Now you see there's one important thing, you have to add your password right here. So let me zoom in a bit. Right here you see your password, and we have to add our password, which I've just copied right here. Now the important thing is that you actually only delete this brackets your password and not anything else. So let me do that right now, and then let me paste my password. So this should now work. Let me zoom out a bit, and now what we can do is actually do an npx prisma db push. So what that has done is now pushed our schema file right here, so our models, to Supabase, and now our schema is in sync with our database. If you get an error right here, that means that your environment variables, so your database URL, is not correct. So probably your password is not correct, or you have misspelled something. Again, just be sure that you spell it correctly, and then you won't get any errors anymore. Also, if we now go to Supabase, to the table editor, you now see these models right here, since now our schema is in sync with our database. So since that has now been actually set up, if we now go back to our auth.ts file, we are now actually done with the configuration. So our auth options have now been configured. We have created our two providers, so the GitHub provider and the email provider. And the last thing we have to do now is actually create the environment variables. Since if I now go back to my .env file, you will see that if I scroll to the top, our GitHub ID, GitHub secret, and all the environment variables for our email are currently empty. So let's first of all go to GitHub and create a new GitHub ID and GitHub secret. So I'm now at github.com. So let me now right here click on this. Let's click on settings. Then let me scroll down to developer settings right here. Let me zoom in a bit. Let's click on OAuth apps and let me create a new OAuth app. Inside of here, I have now to give it an application name. So let's just say Next-Auth, let me spell that correctly, tutorial production. Then for the homepage URL, so since that's currently not deployed to Vercel, our homepage URL is actually localhost 3000. So I will copy that and paste it inside of here. Then the last thing we have to do is add an authorization callback URL, and that's interesting. So what we can do is go back to our NextAuth docs, and then if we click on the providers, and let's just click on Google, so let me find that. And once you're on Google, right here you see an authorization callback URL. And that's actually the same for all OAuth apps. So the only difference is that at the end, you just name your OAuth. So right here it's Google, and for us it will be GitHub. So I can copy this authorization callback URL, go back and paste it inside of here. And then instead of Google, this should be GitHub. So now we have our localhost 3000, our homepage, /API/auth/callback/GitHub. That's our authorization callback. So now I can register this application. And now what you'll see is we get a client ID right here. So let me copy that. And if I go back, I can now add it right here for our GitHub ID. And now we have to generate our client secret. So let me generate a new client secret. And now the important thing is you only see this client secret once, so you can't actually see it again. So please copy it, or if something happens or something goes wrong, you have to regenerate a new client secret. So let me just copy it for now. Let's go back and let's add it to our GitHub secret ID environment variable. So now GitHub is actually set up. So now let's set up email. And for that, we'll use resend. So let's head over to resend. So now I'm at resend.com, and if you didn't know, resend is an email service. So with them, you can send emails. They're very similar, for example, to SendGrid or MailChimp or whatever you used beforehand. I just like resend since it's very simple, it has a simple API, and that's why I use them. So what you will do right now is click on sign in or get started if you don't have an account, and then let's go to the dashboard. So I'm now in the dashboard right here, and what I can do now is click on API keys right here and create a new API key. Then let me give it a name. Let's name it Next-Auth YouTube Next.js 14, and then full access, and let me click on add. This takes a second, and now we have an API key right here. So now let me actually copy that, and what we'll do right now is just paste it right here. We'll use it in a second, and to not lose it anywhere, I will just paste it inside of here. Now let's close that, and what we want to do now is actually get the server user, the server password, the server host, and port. And for that, resend has a blog article. Let me head over it, and if you want to do the same, go into my YouTube description and click on the link. So now I'm at the blog article from resend, and right here they show you what the values are for each value, I guess. So for the host, this is smtp.resend.com. So let me copy that and let's paste it right here for the host. Then the next thing we have is the port, which is 465. Let me copy that and paste it for the port. Then for the username, it's resend. So let me copy it and paste it right here. Then the next step right here, the password is my API key. So I've already copied it right here. So let me again copy it. And then for the password, let me paste that. And then that's already all. The last thing we have is the email from. And now the interesting thing is with Next or with resend is if you're in development, which we are, since we haven't verified our personal email, you will have to actually use their email to send emails. So if you right now click on where's the docs, so right here we have the docs, then let's click on Node.js Quick Start, you will see in development we have to use this onboarding at resend.dev URL or email in that sense. So let me paste it right here. And now the thing is, if you actually go to production and verify your email with resend or your domain in that sense, you can use your own email. But since we're in a development environment and we currently don't verify our domain, we have to use their own email. But that's fine. There's no problem for us since we actually just learn NextAuth, and that's fine for this purpose. So congrats, you have finally now initialized NextAuth. It's now fully configured as you see. We have created an API route, we have created a schema file, we have created the environment variables, we have created the auth options file. Everything has been set up. Now the last thing we have to do is actually connect our frontend to NextAuth and then authenticate the user. So that's exactly what we'll do now. So let's do that. The first thing I will actually do is now go inside of our index page. So inside of the app folder, the page.tsx, let me first of all delete this import image, we don't need that. And then let me just create a new return statement. Inside of here, let me create a div element. Let's give it a class name, which will be padding of 10. Then inside of here, let me create an h1 tag and let's say hello from the index page. This is a public route. What I mean with a public route is that every user can access this route. You don't have to be authenticated to reach the index page. So what do we do now? Well, I think we should now get the session of the user. And for that, there are two ways. You can get either the session through the client or through the server. Now, I would never actually try to get the session through the client because it's not safe, and also to get the session through the server, it's a way cleaner UX for the user. So because of that, I would never suggest you guys to try to get the session through the client. I would always try to get it through the server if possible. So what we'll do right here is create a constant session. You can name it whatever you want. And this will be equal to await get server session. Get server session is imported from NextAuth. And now inside of here, we have to pass an argument. And the argument is actually the auth options. So let me pass my auth options imported from the utils. Now you see we get an error, and it tells me right here, await expressions are only allowed within async functions. So to make it work, we have to mark our export default function as async, and that's exactly what we'll do right now. Export default async function home. And also this is safe since this is a server component, and because of that, nothing will be ever, shown to the client. So that's why we use right here this get server session function, and that's also why we have to mark our function as async, since we have to get the data through the server. So now we get the session actually, and what we can do now is under this h1 is use internally. So let's do if session is there, let's use a question mark, and if it's not there, let's use a colon and return something else. So let's first of all let's say right here h1 you are logged in. And if the user is not logged in, let's say right here, h1, please log in to see something special. So if I now save that and go back, let's go to our localhost, let me reload the page, and you see we get an error, and that's because our dev server is not running. So let me run npm run dev to restart our dev server. So what do you see now? We see right here, hello from the index page, this is a public route. Please log in to see something special. So since we now get the session through the server, we can now check if we have a session. And since we right now don't have a session, so since we're not authenticated, we get right here hello or please log in to see something special. If we would be logged in, so if we would have a session, it would show you are logged in. So what do we do now? I think we should create the auth route to make the user able to authenticate. So for that, let me go inside of the app folder. Let's create a new folder called auth. And let's create a page.tsx. Inside of here, we have to now do an export default function. Let's name it auth route, and let me open that function. Now for the return statement, I will actually try to make it as simple as I can, since this tutorial is not a Tailwind CSS tutorial, but more a NextAuth tutorial. That's why I will try to make it as simple as we can, and also at the same time that it looks kinda okayish to present. So let's first of all start with the card component, and the card component is imported from our components. Then inside of here, let me import the card header, and then inside of the card header, let me get actually the card title, and then let's just say please sign in. I think that's actually quite okay. We can also do a card description, and right here we can say to access the private page, you have to be authenticated, something like that. Let's check out how it looks like. So let me go to /auth and let's see. Please sign in to access the private page. You have to be authenticated. Let me also zoom in right here. Now this is currently actually the width is the full screen. I don't want that. So what I will do now is wrap the whole card element right now in a div element. Then let me paste that back. Let's style the div, so let me give it a class name of w screen, h which will be screen, flex, items which will be center, and justify, which will be center. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks quite alright in my opinion. So now let's create the sign-in form and the GitHub sign-in button. So for that, let's go under the card header. Let's import card content, also imported from our components. And then inside of here, what do? Let's start off with the input for the email. So let's do a div element. Let's give it a class name, which will be flex and flex of call. Then inside of here, let's give it another div element. Let's give it a class name, which will be flex, flex call, and gap y, which will be 2. Then inside of here, I can now import a label, again imported from the components. Inside of here, this is actually not a self-closing tag, but it should be like that. Then inside of here, we can just say email. Under that, let's import the input component from our components. This is now a self-closing tag. We can give it a name, which will be email. We can give it a type, not type of, which will be also email. Let's give it a placeholder. So the placeholder will just be, let's see, name at example.com. I think that's fine. What else do we need? I don't think we need anything else. Let's see how that looks first of all. Name, email, okay, input, yes, that looks fine. Now we need also, of course, a submit button. So let me go under this div element and let's import the button component. The button component is imported from our components. And now let's say login with email. Okay, let's go back. Yeah, almost. The padding is not quite correct, or the margin in that sense. Let's fix that real quick. So let's give it margin for the button. Let's do a class name of margin top. Let's say, I don't know, 4. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, I think that's presentable. We can leave it like that. So now, since we have created the email form pretty much, now I think we should also create a GitHub sign-in button. So under this login with email button, let me actually create another button. Let's say login with GitHub, and let me use a GitHub icon. So we have this Lucid React package, and right here we can use the GitHub icon. That's a self-closing tag. Let me also give it a class name of width 4, age of 4. Let's see how that looks. Okay, that looks all right. Let's also give it a margin left of 4. And then also for the button, let me give it a margin top of, let's say, 5, 6, yeah, 6. Let's see. Okay, that looks all right. Now, the one thing I don't like right here is that the color of the buttons is the same. So I want a different color for the login with GitHub button. So let me give it a variant. And for the variant, we'll do secondary. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks quite alright. So now I think the time has come to start with our first authentication provider, which is GitHub. So let's see how to make the login with GitHub button work. And well, it's actually quite simple, but it won't work right here. So what we have to do is actually create a on-click handler and then call a sign-in function provided by NextAuth. Now, if you're new to Next.js 14 and don't know the difference quite between server components and client components, the fundamental basics are that in a server component, which is rendered on the server and not hydrated anywhere, so it's totally server rendered, you can't have any client-side interaction. And since we want to do an on-click handler, that's a client-side interaction which needs hydration. So what that means, simplified, is that we have to break this login with GitHub button into a separate component marked as use client, which hydrates on the client, and then we can use this button. So let's do that. What I will do now is open my Explorer, go inside of the app folder, create a new folder called components. Then inside of here, let's create a sign in with GitHub button, so .tsx. And now inside of here, it's again very simple. We do a export default function. Let's name it sign in with GitHub. That's not spelled correctly. Let's do it again. And now I can just open the function. Let's do a return statement. And for the return statement, I will just copy this button that I've created right here. So let me copy that. Let's go back and paste it in the return statement. Now let me import the button component. Let me import the GitHub component right here. And now that looks good. I can now go back and just import the sign in with GitHub component that we just created. If I now go back to Chrome, reload everything, you still see everything works. So now let's make the functionality work to sign in with GitHub. For that, first of all, let's go on top, mark this component as use client, because I already told you this has to be hydrated on the client. What we can do now is on the button create a onClick handler, which will have an inline arrow function. And then inside of here, we can actually call a function which is called sign in. Now sign in is imported from NextAuth, as you see right here. And now we have to actually provide an argument. So which provider do we want to use? And we want to use the GitHub provider. So let's use that. And there's one more thing that I can do now actually, and that's add an callback URL. What's the callback URL? Well, that's the URL to which I guess NextAuth, or in that sense GitHub, should redirect once we are done or once we are successfully authenticated. So let's do right here a callback URL. Now the callback URL has to be an actual URL path, not an absolute path. So I can't just give it right here /home or something like that. It has to be an actual URL. And now the thing is, of course, if we're in a development environment, the callback URL will be localhost 3000. But if we deploy our application, this callback URL would of course change. Now there's a very easy fix actually to, instead of hard coding it, what we can do is right here use these I guess upticks, I don't even know how they are called. Then we can use this dynamic value and get the window.location.origin. With that we get the current URL. So for us it would be localhost 3000. And then I can choose to which URL do I want to redirect to. And for us this would be now just the normal home page, so localhost 3000. So that's already finished and that looks good. Now I think we are already done. We have now created an onClick handler, we sign in with GitHub, we have a callback URL, and I think we are done with that. So now we can actually test out if it works. So let's do that right now. Let me reload the page just to be sure. Now I will click on login with GitHub. And let's see, I get redirected. It tells me to authorize my, I guess, application. So let me click on authorize my profile account. And now you see I get redirected to the home page. I now also get a notification for my Gmail that I'm now signed in or that I've granted access. And as you see, I'm now successfully authenticated since our ternary now states instead of, let me see, what did we have? Instead of saying please log in to see something special, it now tells us you are logged in. So now we have a successful session, which means that we are authenticated. If I of course reload the page, you'll still see that the session is still persisted, and that's very nice. So now you see that works. But now, of course, if we again go back to the /auth website, so let's do that, you can still reach it. That's not quite what we want. If the user is signed in, we of course don't want him to be allowed to reach the auth page, because why should you? He is already authenticated. So again, it's a very handy trick. What we can do now is we can go to the auth route. We can again get our server session. Why can we do that? That's because this route is a server component. So I can do a const session. Let's do an await get server session imported from NextAuth. And for the argument, let's get the auth options. Now we get an error. It tells me await expressions are only allowed within async functions. So let's make it an export default async function. Now we don't get any error anymore. And now we can say if a session exists, let's just do a return redirect. Now it's important. Redirect is imported from next navigation. And let's say just a slash, so the home page. So let's save it. Let's see if that works. I will reload the page. You see we get redirected. And if I now try to reach the auth page, what you will see is that it won't work. So that's perfect. It now works and we actually protect our auth route from authenticated users. But now the question comes, how do I sign out of my application? Well, again, for that we have a very handy function. So let's go back to our page.tsx right here. And what I would do now is create a button, do a onClick handler, and then just call the logout function. Again, since this is a server component which renders on the server, I can't do that. So what we have to do is actually create a separate component, which I will do right now. Let's go into the app folder, into the components, and let's do a logout button.tsx. Then let's create a new export default function. Let's name it logout button. And then let me just open that. One thing I would do right now is just uppercase logout button, and then inside of here I can now do a return statement. We can return a button element, so let's import button from our components, and then let's just say logout That looks quite alright in my opinion. Then what we can do is go back to our page.tsx, and then where we have you are logged in, let's wrap this h1 in a div element. Let's paste the h1 back, and now we can import our logout button. Let's see how that looks. Let's go back. Yes, we have now the logout button, but if I click on it, of course, nothing happens. So let's fix that, of course. So what we first of all have to do is, of course, again, mark this component as a client component. So let's do a use client. And then for the button, we have to add an onClick handler. So let's do an onClick handler, again with an inline arrow function. And then inside of here, I want to call the sign-out function provided by NextAuth. Now inside of here, I can again add a callback URL actually, and we can again get the window.location.origin and then redirect to this route. So let's do that. Again, let's use these upticks. Then let's use this dynamic value, get our window.location.origin, and then let's do a /auth to redirect to the auth page so that the user can again log in. Let's save this right here. On click, sign out, callback URL. Yes, I think that should work. We have a use client, so this is a client component. So let's test out if it works. So now let's click on logout. Let's see what happens. Sign out. Are you sure you want to sign out? Yeah, sign out. And we get redirected to /auth. That works. Let me again try to log in with GitHub. Let's see. It loads and now you're logged in. Let me again click on logout. I get again redirected to /auth and my session is gone. If I now try to reach the normal homepage again, you see please log in to see something special. Let me also go to the page.tsx. Let me wrap this h1 in a div element, and underneath let's say a button, or not a button, but let's say oh no, it's good. Let's do button, imported from components. And then inside of here, we can do an as child, import the link component from next/link, give it an href, which will be /auth, and let's say log in. If I now go back, we now have this login button. If I click on it, we get redirected to /auth. I can click on login with GitHub and we load and it works perfectly. If I again try to reach the /auth page, you see I can't reach it. So now let's again click on logout. What I want to do now is make login with email work. So let's do that right now. There's again one problem. Right now our form, if I go to our auth route, so let me open that. You see right here that our form is currently embedded in the server component, which is fine. But now the problem is that we actually have to convert this form into a client component. So again, we open our Explorer, go inside of the app folder, inside of the components folder, and then inside of here, let me just create a sign in form.tsx. Let's again do a export default function. Let's name it sign in form, and then let me open this right here. Now inside of here, let's do a return statement. And for the return statement, I will just copy this button up to this div right here. So let's copy that. Close that. Then inside of here, let me use a form element actually. Let me delete the action and then paste what I've just copied. Now let me import the label first of all. So from our components, let me import the input from our components and let me import the button from our components. Who would have thought? Then for the button, let me actually give it a type, which will be submit, since we want to submit the form with this button. And then for our auth page, I can now just import our sign in form. So let's save that. Let's go back. And now our login with email button is not stretched the full 100%. So let me go back to the sign in form. Let's give it a class name of wfull. Let's see if that helps. Yes, that helps. And that works now perfectly. This looks nice. So now let's actually make the functionality work. So what I actually want to do is call a async function. Now this will be a normal async function, not a server action. And then with this, I will then sign in with my email. So now the first thing I want to do is now actually is create state. So what I will do is now right here on top, let's do a const email and set email. This will be equal to useState, and useState is imported from React, and I will set it to null as an initial state. Then for our input, what I can do is on change, we can get the event and then set our email state to the event.target.value. So everything that we write in our input will just be set to our state. Now we get an error and it tells me right here, type string is not assignable to type null. So what I can do is right here for the useState is add a generic, and this could be either null or let's say a string. So now the error is gone and this looks very nice. So now I think we should create the async function actually. So what we can do right here is do an async function. Let's say, how do we want to call it? Sign in with email, and then let me open that right now. Now, what do I want to do right here? First of all, I want to sign in with my email, and then I want to check if this signing in with email works. Then I will actually create a toast where it says, congrats, successfully signed in, and if not, then I want to create a error toast. So what I will do first of all is do a const sign in result. This will be equal to await sign in. Now sign in is imported from NextAuth React. Now with what provider do I want to sign in? Well, I want to sign in with email, since that's the provider which I want to use. But now I also have to add a bit of configuration. So first of all, I have to pass the email which I want to use, and I want to have to pass the callback URL. So what we can do right here is first of all give it an email which will be equal to our email from our state. Then we can do a callback URL. Now for the callback URL, I will again just use the upticks and then get a window.location.origin. So now that looks nice. But now we of course also have to connect this function somehow with our form. And that's also quite easy. We give it an action, and the action will be equal to sign in with email. So that looks very nice. We don't get any errors. And yeah, I think this should almost work. I did some gibberish. Let's see. React server component error. You're importing a component that needs state. So the error is we use right here state. And the thing with state is it has to be marked in a client component. So let's do a use client. Let's save it. Let's go back. Let's reload everything. And this works. So now I think it's time to test it out. Now there's one important thing before I do that. With resend, so our email provider, you have to type your email that you have used to create your account at resend, since we are currently in a dev mode. So you can only send emails to yourself. So let's do that right now. I will send an email to myself with the account that I've created, log in with email. Now you see one thing is we got redirected to this verify request URL. We don't really want that. I don't really like this UX, I guess. So what we can do is actually add a redirect prop right here and set that to false, so we don't get redirected to anywhere. And what I can do now is actually open my email as I said. So let me do that real quick. And now you see I got the magic link. So what I can do now is click on sign in, as you see, and so now you see I got the magic link. So what I can do now is actually click on that. So let's click on sign in, and as you see I'm now signed in. So it tells me you're logged in. So now let me click on sign out and see if that works, and we get redirected to /auth. So you see this also works. But now there's currently one UX problem. The user does not really know when he should go to the email and check if he got a sign-in link. So what we can do is actually do a toast. So if the a function was successful, we can actually call, or we can actually show a toast. And if it wasn't successful, we can show a failed toast. So how do we do that? Let's go back. And right here, what we can do now is an if statement. So if the sign-in result is not okay, so if sign-in result.okay is not okay, we can actually return a toast. Now the toast is imported from our components, and then inside of here we can say a title. For the title, let's just say, I guess, well, this did not work, ... description. And for the description, I will just say something went wrong. Please try again. And then I can also do a variant, and this will just be, let's say, destructive. So that looks fine. And if this is not true, so that the function worked, what we can do is return a other toast right here, and then let's say title, check your email, and then for the description, let's just say a magic link has been sent to you. So that should work. Now, actually it won't work. Why won't it work? That's because we actually also have to tell the layout that we want to use a toaster. So let's go to our layout right now. And under the children, what I want to do now is import a toaster. Now the toaster is again imported from our components, and now our toast will actually work. So let me reload the page. Let me enter my email right here. Let me click on login with GitHub, and now on the bottom right, you see a toast. Check your email, a magic link has been sent to you. If I now go back to my email, you now see that I get a magic link. So I can now click on sign in, I will get redirected, and this also works perfectly as you see. So now authentication actually works. I can log out, I can sign in with email, I can sign in with GitHub. We do error handling with email and we show a toast. So this works perfectly. Let's test out again everything just to be sure. So let me click on log out. We get redirected to /auth. That's good. Let me log in with GitHub. We should get redirected to the home page. Yes, we are. We see also the successful state where I can log out. So let me again log out right now. Then let me use my email again. Let me click on login with email. We should see a toast. Yes, we see that. Let me head over back to my email. And what do you see? We see the magic link. So now authentication fully works in Next.js, and what we have to do now is actually deploy our application. So let's do that right now. So to deploy our application, we first of all have to create a GitHub repository. So I'm now at github.com/new. Let's name our repository Next-Auth Next.js 14. I will make it public and click on create repository. Right here now you see it gives me instructions how to connect my code to this repository. So what we have to do is open the terminal, let me stop my dev server, let me clear everything. Let's do a git init to initialize a new git repository. Let's do a git add dot to add everything. Let me do a git commit -m and let's say finished. Let's click enter. And then let's see what else we have to do. We have to create a branch. So let's copy that, paste that. Then the next step is to add in remote origin. Let's copy that and paste that. And the last step is to push our code. So let me copy that and paste that. Now our code will be pushed to GitHub. And if I now reload the page, you should now see our finished code. And that's what you see. So this works perfectly. So now I'm at vercel.com/new to deploy our application. So let me click on import right here. And now for the environment variables, we'll just go back to our code. I will copy all of the environment variables and just paste them right here. Now, before I click deployment, there's one important thing. If you go back to the NextAuth docs and click on deployment, you will see there's one important thing that we haven't added. So if you go to Vercel right here, which is our deployment partner, you will see one important thing we have to add is the NextAuth secret environment variable. So let me first of all copy the name. Right here, create a new environment variable, and for the value, right here, you can click on this link to generate a new secret. Right here, it has now generated a new secret. I can use that now, paste it right here, and now we have created a secret. That's actually all we need, and what I can do now is actually deploy this application. So let me click on deploy, and let's see what happens. So we now got an error as you see right here. It tells me Prisma has detected that this project was built on Vercel, which caches dependencies. This leads to an outdated Prisma client because Prisma's auto generation isn't triggered. To fix this, we can just click on this link right here to learn more. So let me click on that. Let's open this right here. And as what we can do to prevent that is add a custom post install script. So let me copy this post install script. Let's go to Visual Studio Code. Let's open my package.json, and under this lint, let me just paste our post install script. I will now open the terminal, clear everything. Then let us do a git add everything with a dot. Let's do a git commit -m, and let's say added post install script. And then let me click enter and let's do git push. This will now push the code to GitHub, and Vercel will automatically rebuild our application. So let's check it out. So our application has now been finally successfully deployed. So let's check how it looks like. Let me zoom in a bit. It tells me hello from the index page. This is a public route. Please log in to see something special. Let's do that. Let me click on login. We'll get redirected to our auth page and you will see in a second we'll get an error. If I now click on login with GitHub, you will see right here it will redirect and it will redirect to localhost 3000. So what's the error? Well, if you can remember, when we created our GitHub app, we have added a callback URL which was localhost 3000, but now this URL has changed to this NextAuth Next.js 14.vercel.app URL. So we have of course to change that. So let's go to GitHub right now. And now for our OAuth app, I can click on it again. And what we can do now is actually change the URL. So instead of localhost 3000, I can go back, copy our new URL without the /auth, go back, paste it inside of here and do the same right here. So let me paste that and this will now be an authorization callback URL of my domain /API/auth/callback/GitHub. I can now click on update application and if I go back to my code now, we load everything, it should actually work. So let me click on login with GitHub and let's see what happens. Let's see. It loads and it says you're logged in. So that looks nice. Let me again log out. We should get logged out. Yes, we also get redirected to /auth. If I now again try to reach our normal route, let's see how it looks like. Please log in. So that works. Let me again click on login. So now let's test out if email works. So let me add my email right here. Let me click on login with email. We now on the bottom see a toast, check your email. So let's do that. You now see I get a magic link. So let me click on sign in right here. Let me right here click on details, visit this unsafe site, that's fine. And now we should get redirected and we got redirected and it tells us you're logged in. So now our production authentication works. I can also try to reach the auth route and you will see this won't work since I will get redirected to the home page since it's a secured route. So now you see it works, NextAuth fully works. We now understand how to make authentication using OAuth and email work, how to deploy it, how we store it inside of our database, how we create a connection with Prisma and everything like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope I can see you in the next video. So now, bye.